Now, if you feel like you're getting poorer, if you feel like you're going backwards economically, you're not alone. New analysis from the coalition released this week has found that despite Labour's relief measures on the cost of living, Australian living standards won't return to pre-pandemic levels until at least the 2029-2030 financial year. That's 5 years away, at least. Joining me now to discuss this and more is Shadow Environment Minister Jonathon Duniam. Jonathon, thanks so much for coming on the program this evening. This is some really grim analysis. From the coalition's point of view, what needs to be done to turn Australia's failing living standards around, and how do we wind up not falling behind, the rest of the world?
Which is sadly what's happening, James, and Happy New Year to you and your viewers as well. Look, I think, yes, although these numbers don't really bear out a Happy New Year for many Australians, what needs to happen, frankly, is there does need to be a change of government, firstly and foremostly. I mean, it is this government's policies and lack of policy direction and solutions to the problems Australians are facing that is putting households and small businesses too in the situation they're in. I mean, we didn't need to produce this report to remind people of how tough they're doing it. Labor themselves say they understand that households are doing it tough, but where are the policy responses? We continue to blindly blunder on with this green energy transition, which is driving up power prices. Industrial relations laws are making it more costly to do business. They're out of control. Government spending is driving up inflation. There has been no change to any of these issues. And to have another 3 years of Labor, which would further bake in these terrible things which are driving up the cost of living, that is what we don't need. So that's why between now and the election there'll be a great offering of policies that will give Australians a choice about whether they want a future where they can afford to live or one under Labor where things get worse.
Well, we're looking forward to seeing some of those policies come out, and hopefully some of them will be around net zero. But I want to move on now to, speaking of net zero and climate, I just love this. A new study has claimed that rising temperatures driven by, yes, you guessed it, climate change will lead to an additional 72,000 crimes per year in Australia. The paper is titled Crime, Weather and Climate Change in Australia, and found that an increase in the number of days over 30 degrees was linked to a higher crime rate. Jonathon, this seems like a bit of a long bow here. I don't know. I sort of feel like when it's over 30 degrees, I don't really feel like doing much less going out and committing crimes. What do you make of this report?
Oh, it's nonsense, James. I mean, this is ridiculous. The last person who blamed anything on the weather was Milli Vanilli, who blamed it on the rain. But we have to see more personal responsibility. Yet to have people producing reports that if you're going to commit a crime, it's probably because of the weather. I mean, that's a nonsense argument. To suggest that we now must act on climate change because it's going to cause a surge in occurrences of crime, I think is an absolute ridiculous argument to make. I'd love to meet the scientists who have penned this report, but it is just something I wouldn't probably advise many people to waste their time on reading, because it's like a lot of the other science that's out there behind some of these claims. It is just made up.
No, yeah, and I'm just looking forward to the day when somebody goes to a judge and says, oh, look, the lawyer says, it was climate change. What, done it, Your Honor? But anyway, another fascinating story here today. Indigenous leader Gerhard Pearson has accused the former Queensland Labor government of, get this, rushing to nominate Cape York for a World Heritage listing ahead of last year's election. Now, the state LNP Environment Minister has now ordered a review of the nomination after Indigenous groups claimed there has been a lack of consultation. And Mr. Pearson told the Weekend Australian, quote, this was a scurrilous exercise by ministers and their conservation champions to use the state election to run over the top of the people of Cape York. Well, for Premier Stephen Miles says there's been 15 years of consultation. Is he wrong?
is absolutely wrong, and you only have to talk to the people on the ground that point out that there was no such consultation at all. This is a typical play by the Labor Party. I mean, they did it in Canberra with the Blaney gold mine. They just rode roughshod over the top of the local Indigenous community there to stop a $1 billion gold mine, and it appears Stephen Miles has gone and ridden roughshod over the local traditional owners in Cape York to put forward this listing. It's the capital cities knows best approach. And what is the oddest part about this, James, is these people who are doing this are the same people who proposed a voice so that these people could be listened to and they could have a say. Well, I question how serious that proposition was when you've got those proponents of the voice out there telling those Indigenous communities what they think is best for them. It's a little bit ridiculous to say that you're all about empowering Indigenous communities, but on the other hand, going and doing what you think is best and what they need on their behalf.
Well, this is, becoming a bit of a trend here. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned the Blaney gold mine, but there's also been a story now that local councils here in New South Wales have been accused of weaponizing heritage laws to block housing projects after 1,215 sites were added to heritage registers in just 5 years. What about just using general heritage listing processes? Where does, you've got a housing crisis, here. How does, and I know a lot of this sort of state stuff, but clearly this is going to be a federal issue as well come the election. Does all of this stuff need to be reviewed?
No, absolutely it does. I mean, we're talking about spending billions and billions of dollars to build houses, and to date, in this term of government, none have been built. And the best thing we could do is change the laws. To have a quick review, figure out what the problems are and change the laws. I mean, federally, you've got tens of thousands of homes held up under the EPBC Act because of federal environmental approvals delaying the ability for these projects to go ahead. You've got state laws doing the same, and now you've got local government putting their oar in the water to do what they can to hold things up too. And seriously, we should all be pulling in the same direction. People are doing it tough. You've got new home buyers who want to be able to get into the market. Nothing is helping them get in, and this waste of taxpayers' money to try and build homes when your laws are stopping them from being built just points to the need for reform. Regulatory and legal reform, that's all that needs to happen here.
Get it out, get the government out of the way and let things happen. Jonathon Duniam, very well said. Thank you so much for your time here on Credit.